Hello. Today we visit r/AskReddit to see who got away with murder that should be in prison right now. Make sure to comment where you are from. I would like to see where my audience is from. With that, sit back and enjoy. Issei Sagawa. Japanese guy who was obsessed with cannibalism of white women. Was studying in France, lured a fellow student over to study and have dinner. He killed her and ate her. Was caught, but due to weird law technicalities between France and Japan on extradition and stuff, he got to walk free. Still is, living back in Japan. That's ducked up. Someone else in this thread quoted this from the Wikipedia article about him, from the post-release section, and it's ducked. Sagawa was nearly accepted by a French language school because the manager was impressed by his courage in using his real name, but employees protested and he was rejected. Dangerous incompetence and management, a match made in heaven. Was caught, but due to weird law technicalities between France and Japan on extradition and stuff, he got to walk free. Still is, living back in Japan. I believe the weird technicalities is that France deported him back to Japan for him to be prosecuted but never sent any of the evidence to Japan. Japan wanted to prosecute him but had no way to, since you can't have a court case without any evidence. Therefore Japan had no choice but to let him go free. The French found him legally insane and committed him to a mental asylum. Afterwards he was deported to Japan, where they found he was indeed sane but couldn't prosecute him as the French had sealed the case files after the insanity decision and therefore could not access any of the evidence. Even worse is the guy wrote a book about it and is very unrepentant. He hates the negative press about it because it's bothersome and he feels like he's attacked. God, I hate that guy. He thinks there is nothing wrong with what he did. He wrote that he wanted to know what it felt like to kill and eat someone, so he did it. He doesn't care at all. Pretty sure he doesn't even think about her as a human. He's enjoying his mild fame and has no regret, seemingly. I can't imagine being that ducked up. David Miscavige. Where is Shelley? When the Sea Org people ask me if I want to take their personality tests, I respond with, if Shelley is the admin, and then they ignore me. Oh my gosh, stealing this, I get accosted by them all the time. I usually say, sorry, I can't afford to join your cult, but this response is so much better. For the first time ever, I saw ducking Scientology commercials on TV recently. Starring David Miscavige. Like, what the duck? I was yelling, where's your wife? At the TV lol. One theory I heard was not that she's dead, but she has an obvious medical condition that according to Scientology you're supposed to be able to cure if you're high enough level. It looks bad if the leader's wife has a thing you're preaching is curable, so they keep her hidden. Kinda wish that it's true cause it's less dark, but it's all just conjecture. I hope the truth does at least come out eventually. My guess is just like other dictatorship, that once David is dead or ousted, the new leadership cleans house and releases some dirt. The killer, of JonBenet Ramsey. Which is really one of three people. Her father, her mother, her brother. For those who do not know, JonBenet Ramsey was a child beauty queen who was found dead in their family's basement. It is believed that one her family members committed the crime, but this comment describes the debacle of this situation. I used to think that too. I mean, the father probably had something to do with it being so high up. The main reason everyone thinks it was a family member was because the cops said no one could fit through the basement window. The part that always gets left out is that a guy, I forgot if he was a cop or journalist etc., literally crawled through the window with no problem to prove them wrong. That whole crime scene was botched by dumb ducking cops. Letting the mother touch the body, letting the father search the house, all while it was a crime scene. Pretty sure they started cleaning too before investigation was completed. Casey Anthony. She lives in my city and it's really creepy seeing her out, mainly because of how aggressively normal she is in public. She was in hiding for many years, but these days she will go to a local bar and shoot the shit with people. She had this weird posse of people who followed her around downtown West Palm. She knows they recognize her and she likes it. They go up to her and talk to her and she acts like they're friends. It's some seriously psycho shit. The district attorney is 100% at fault for her not being in jail. They knew they didn't have the evidence for murder but caved to public pressure. If they went for manslaughter like they should have, it would have been a slam dunk. This is very true and why we as the public should avoid moral panics. An assistant DA friend of mine from a small city mentioned he loves when the public knows about a crime as it brings more resources to investigating, prosecuting it. but hates when the public knows who did it, as that more often than not harms the legal process. The scum who killed Junko Furuta, they got such light sentences for the crimes they committed. Miyano was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Minato received a 5 to 7 year sentence, Watanabe a 5 to 9 year sentence, and Joe an 8-year sentence. Deplorable and despicable, they should have all had life at the very least. Holy shit. I just read the Wikipedia page and it was revolting. They're all free men now. What pisses me off also. The police were initially puzzled by the confession, as they had been referring to the murder of a different woman and her 7-year-old son that had occurred 9 days prior to Furuta's abduction, a case which remains unsolved. And there's no link to it. The police didn't know Miyano was involved with Furuta, he was a suspect for 2 other murders and they did nothing? Am I wrong here? Is there a link I missed? This is all so friggin' tragic, and I hope that Furuta is haunting them. They ducking deserve it. They deserved life in prison. Their parents even trashed her grave for ruining their sons' lives. Like, first of all, they didn't get shit for punishment. Second, if they didn't want to suffer consequences, then don't ducking do the crime in the first place. r/Marie Ann Watson. I just came across this today. It's a subreddit started by the child of a murder victim dedicated to documenting everything she knows about her mother's murderers, who happened to be her foster parents. It's an absolutely crazy story. During a custody battle in which her mother was trying to get her back from the foster home, the foster parents dismembered her mother right in front of her. She was a child at the time. The foster parents never spent a day in prison for it. Instead, they went on the run with their foster children and forced them to endure years of hellish abuse and torture. She was eventually rescued by a private investigator, and although she and the other foster kids got away from those monsters, they never got justice. The case of Marie Ann Watson's murder is still unsolved to this day. The foster parents were never charged for it. The daughter, who is an adult now, has been posting to that subreddit for a while now, providing updates about the case. It's absolutely heartbreaking to see the threads from years ago where she is getting her hopes up that the case might progress, only for it to hit another wall and go cold again. It seems she has now lost hope that the foster parents will ever be charged, and indeed, one of them has already passed away without receiving justice. She recently finished and released an autobiography about her life, called Dandelion Child, which I'd recommend reading. Karla Homolka. What's weird is that her family forgave her. That is really strange. And she killed her own sister. So, unfortunately, the Canadian legal system really screwed the families of the victims in this situation. I have to presume that the plea deal must have been ironclad and irrevocable. I'll do a long story short. Karla went to the police as a beaten woman who said she was forced to engage in her husband's crimes. The courts took mercy on her because of this. At some point, with info from Karla, her attorney sent his secretary at his behest to get some videos out of the ceiling of the home she shared with Paul. The tapes told a totally different story than she did. She was an active participant in the rapes, torture and murder of 3 teenage girls, including her own sister, whom she gave to Paul as a gift since she was a virgin, and Paul often degraded and beat her in anger over it. She blamed all the deaths on her husband, but Paul later told the court, and she didn't deny beating one of the girls to death with a barbell while Paul was out of the house. They killed her sister shortly before their wedding and ate Easter dinner with the corpse of another girl underneath them in their basement. Her name is now Leanne Teal, and every ducking time this bitch changes her name, her place of work, her address, any of it, criminal justice sleuths track her down and never let her forget her crimes. Her parents have since forgiven her and have a relationship with their grandkids, whom go to schools that Karla volunteers at. My grandmother. She's the storybook definition of the sweet southern grandma to your face, but a true snake in the grass. Our entire family believes she murdered my aunt, her oldest daughter. Even with our constant efforts, police refuse to look into it. She is, however, on our city's most wanted list for burglary at 78-year-old. Why does everyone think she murdered your aunt? Okay, a not-so-quick story time. My grandmother had 5 children, and we believe she killed her oldest 8 years ago. She is now on our city's most wanted list for burglary at 78. For reference, I have not seen her in 6 years. But we do know that she is alive plus in the area because she keeps in touch with my aunt, one of her daughters. At the time of her death, my aunt was living with my grandmother, her mom, while taking care of her grandson, 2 years old, full-time. This particular night, he was spending the night at a relative's. My grandma is sweet as pie and the devil himself wrapped in skin. I'm not sure what all is wrong with her, but there's definitely some sort of untreated personality disorder. A friend of the family was visiting that night and said that when she left around 10 p.m., my aunt looked frustrated sitting on the couch while my grandmother was on one of her cussing rants calling her every name in the book. She said my grandma was losing her mind, so she decided to leave. My aunt was not a confrontational person. That side of my family is extremely toxic, and the reason I walked away from 98% of them when I became a mother. When my grandmother or uncles would go into a rage, my aunt would always stay calm plus collected. She wasn't one to try and diffuse the situation, but she also never added to it. She would sit there and take anything my grandmother had to say. Like how she ruined all of her marriages because she was so beautiful, my aunt was molested by 2 of her husbands, or how now she was just a stupid fat bitch. My grandmother had a pistol that she always kept within range. It was in her purse, she slept with it under her pillow. Although I have never witnessed it, many people in the family have accused her of hitting them with it in a fit of rage. I 100% believe this to be true. My aunt's body was found slumped over one halfway on the couch with a blanket pulled up to her chin. She had a big bulge on the back of her head that we believe came from being stuck by an object. My grandma's story is, she came into the living room that night and thought my aunt was sleeping, so she covered her up and went to bed. The next morning she was in the same position, so she called my other aunt and then waited almost an hour before calling 911. How is it not weird that you cover a body slumped over, presume they're sleeping, plus cover it up? That just doesn't make sense. It's assumed my aunt had been dead for 9+ hours before 911 was called. She claims she called 911 earlier in the night when she thought something was wrong, but they just never came. After cops failed to follow up on this, my cousins were able to discover that there were not any other 911 calls that came through besides that one. Also a big piece of evidence that baffles us that the cops didn't take seriously. My grandmother sat on the couch, calm and seemingly emotionless. She wasn't sad, crying, frantic, or displayed any signs that a mother just lost their child. I know that everyone experiences loss in different ways, but there was just a cold ice tone to her, almost blackness within her eyes. She fought with my aunt's children plus eventually won to have my aunt cremated. Although we'll never really know what happened or how she died, we all believe my grandma hit my aunt in the back of her head. I don't know if killing her was her intentional, but she doesn't show any remorse either way. She immediately pawned all my aunt's jewelry plus has since been heard in multiple occasions talk about how her daughter died because of who she was. God punished her, but it's okay because she's dancing with the angels now. It gives me goosebumps. What a twisted, ducked up thing to say. My aunt is also not the first person we've suspected my grandmother has murdered. Her last husband had fallen ill, was hospitalized, and given recommended for home health aide to come and do daily meds, health check, etc. My grandmother refused the health nurse, said she could do it herself, and took him home. 2 days later, he was dead. Plus later cremated. IDK how she's still living at 78 years old. I honestly thought this lady would be dead by now by all of her poor life choices, but here she is, still kicking, running from the law, doubtful they are actively looking, and probably still baking homemade biscuits somewhere. Thank you for watching all the way until the end, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment where you are from. Click the video above if you want to continue to watch my content. Until next time.